One of the things that we think about a lot at Daggerfin, and we've been talking about a lot with executives and different kind of roundtable discussions that I'm having, um, is the return to office and the has it worked? For companies that are thinking about doing it on a more permanent basis, how to do it. And so this article came out over the weekend, or at least I saw it over the weekend, talking about how in the Midwest, downtown cities in the Midwest are really struggling, indexed to the rest of the country in terms of visits to downtown, right? And as somebody who spent a significant amount of time in the Midwest, in Chicago and Cleveland and in Detroit, um, I can kind of see how this is true. And, in traveling around the rest of the country, you can kind of get a sense that, of course, yeah, things have changed since COVID, but maybe they haven't been hit as hard as the Midwest, so to speak. And so the chart that is on screen is from Business Insider, and it shows the ratio of winter 2020 to 2023 downtown visits against 2019 visits, right? And you can see that places that are, your Torontos, your Philadelphias, those kinds of cities, you're seeing about half of the people coming back. San Francisco, of course, has its own issues, and those are well documented across the internet. So you don't really have to talk about them too much in terms of why people aren't returning downtown there. But that's also a function of kind of the work that is, predominantly occupies San Francisco, which is tech, and tech is one of the kind of the pillars of if you want to look at different industries that are pointing to, okay, work from home is kind of the future or the present even. But what you have too there in the red is the Midwestern cities. And, they over-index at the top half of this chart, of course. And what that points to, and as somebody who's lived there, is really a lack of reason to visit downtown in these cities. And what I think is interesting isn't pointing at the cities and saying, okay, what is this city doing well versus that city? It's to think of the correlation to companies. And kind of going back to the initial point of this recording, as companies think about return to office, the world has changed, right? And I think, I'm a proponent of the office. I think it's a good idea, especially if you're younger in your career, to be in the office as it's a proximity thing to learning, to management, to different things. It's also easier for management to be able to keep tabs on what's happening in their departments, in their projects when everybody's in one place at the same time. You also get a rapport and camaraderie that is really falling apart in companies that don't have an in-person kind of policy. Hybrid, I think, is probably the more predominant way to do it right now, and I think that might be the correct way until we get to a place where, well, I guess it really depends on the kind of industry or company you work for, but I've seen, at least in my experience, hybrid work quite well for a lot of companies where you're in office a few days of the week. And what we need to think of as employer branding specialists or people that are in organizational development is do, other than, the kind of table stakes stuff, which is we've got to be in the office because it's better for us, right? Because it's better for our careers long term. I think we talked about it in a prior recording. The idea that productivity is better when everybody's in one place at the same time. But is there enough of a reason to motivate, to engage people to come back to the office? And that when we look at the best cities in the United States, think of, I mean, best is subjective, of course, but we think of the ones that maybe haven't been hit as hard by these downturns in terms of people leaving. Stereotypically, we think New York, the Miamis of the world, the West Coast. They have enduring reasons for you to want to be there, right? Whether it's a great restaurant scene, or in the case of Miami, you've got great weather, but also this booming crypto kind of thing going on. Cities that have recovered well in the aftermath of the pandemic have always had an enduring reason, or are building an enduring reason for people to want to migrate to them. And I think the same has to be true in our mentality around building employer brands and building return to office strategies for companies, right? We need to build enduring reasons as to why people should come. And these things have to be authentic to the company, of course. These things have to be rooted in some sort of data, rooted in some sort of honesty around the reasons why we need to be back in the office. Because I think people respond to honesty and authenticity better than they do facades, right? In my experience doing employer branding work or marketing work over the years, candidates, applicants, they can see through things that are done just for aesthetics, right? I think of large, we point to it here at Daggerfin, but there's an industry of quite a well-known industry, quite an attractive industry to go work in. But if we looked at their social media posts throughout the pandemic, the shift from we work hard all the time and we attract and recruit the smartest people became, Fred's on the beach in Portugal on a Wednesday, and Joanne is on the beach in Barbados on a Friday, and it just became not about work. And I think the more honest that we can become, as most companies, not every company has the balance sheet or the financial kind of firepower to just throw money at every single problem. So we've got to think thoughtfully about the reasons and the messaging that we're putting out into the world as to what kind of employer we are and what we bring to the candidates that we want to attract to our companies. And so just being honest around the reasons. Look, we're a leave once you get things done kind of culture, for example, right? Or we're not going to micromanage you, but we expect things to get done. And once they get done, then you do whatever you need to do. Or we invest in our people as a kind of landing spot, and we want you to move on to, hopefully bigger and better things. And so we're going to arm you with all the learning and development that we can while you're here. Right? So there are different reasons why you can get people to buy into your cause or buy into your return to office strategy, buy into all these things, as long as you are thoughtful about the execution and have a real reason as to why you're doing it. So it's just an interesting kind of corollary to this article that I saw in this chart primarily around cities and the cities that are struggling to get people back to their downtowns, and the reasons why, which, if I were to recap, is there isn't an enduring reason as to why you would even want to visit, for example. Personal example, I used to live in Cleveland. My family lived in Cleveland for a few years. There is no reason to visit downtown. Other than I think there's a casino down there and maybe a few eating spots, but you can absolutely live your entire life in that area and not have to visit downtown Cleveland. And I think we've got to think the same way as companies and as employers around the reasons why people should come back to the office, should do the things that we want them to do as management.